first kind of presentation from, you know, the RaC Guild and from Jason. Looking forward to this morning. I don't know whether there is an agenda page, next page. Yeah, there you go. So I've been really looking forward to this, hearing about Blawx. I've heard about it from a number of different people. Really looking forward to digging into that. And then we've got Ariel and Tina, Policy2Code update, which I'm looking forward to too. So rather than me blathering on, let's get stuck in. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. So I have bad news and I have good news. The bad news is that the website that I usually use for demonstrating Blawx is not working at the moment. The good news is that means I have to demonstrate the new version that no one has ever seen before. So you guys get the preview of the remix, as it were. So let me figure out how to do screen sharing in this thing here. And share that tab and see if that works for you. Now, are you seeing that with the purple on the side there? Great. Yep. Okay. So I am kind of give you a tour of this. This is very kind of prototypey. I haven't spent a lot of time trying to make the user interface particularly good. The main reason for this new version of Blawx has been to play around with what I can get LLMs to do with the encodings, but the basic idea is that it's a rules as code tool that's designed to make it easy for subject matter experts who are not programmers to do declarative logic encodings of legislation. So it's divided up into projects, and my hello world for rules as code is rock, paper, scissors. So we've got the rock, paper, scissors project, and you can see it's got a lot of different bits and pieces in here. The first two, categories and relationships, are kind of how you set out the vocabulary that you're going to do your encoding with. So in categories, you've got all the kinds of data types that come by default, but then you've also got players and games and signs. And those are the main types of things that you're going to be talking about in your rules. And then under relationships, you're going to be talking about the relationships between those different things. So winner, for example, is a relationship that is a relationship between a game and a player. And you can add information in here about how to generate the natural language version of a statement about winners. And so this is, it needs a lot of work for usability, but this is kind of where the categories and relationships get created. Now you have legal documents with a bunch of other things. So the only legal document in this project is the Rock, Paper, Scissors Act, which has a bunch of sections in here and some kind of generic information. You can create more than one document and you can relate them to each other, but there's not really any way to talk about those relations in the rules yet. I haven't gotten that far, but you have the data structure to include more. The important thing is that you go into these sections of the rule, and then in a one-to-one relationship, you have these sections of code that represent what the text is in the rule. So if we go into the Rock, Paper, Scissors Act, and we want to look at section 2A, where it defines rock as being one of the signs, we can look in the code editor and see that the code for that is we know rock is a sign. And so this is a drag and drop interface where if you want to define facts, you drag out a fact block, and then the particular types of categories that you defined, players, games, and signs, all become available in the objects menu so that you can create them. You can ask whether things are in a particular category, and then you can talk about relationships like that particular player was the winner of that particular game. And all of these blocks are being automatically generated on the basis of what you defined in your categories and relationships before. So you're creating this little language, and then you're using it to encode the meaning of the different sections of the rule as you go. So this is, we know about rocks, and then we can look at more complicated things like rock beats scissors, which looks just like that, very straightforward. And then you can look at the most complicated, which is how do you figure out who the winner is, and the code for that currently looks like this. Now, I'm not in the habit of giving things capital letters as variable names. I like to be more descriptive than that. But the reason I'm leaving it like this is because this is actually the code that was generated by the LLM. So you can see that this button down here, suggest encoding. All of the sections of code that I've shown you so far were drafted by the LLM by clicking on suggest encoding. I'm not going to do it right now because right now the code is working. I'll come back and try it afterwards. And the code generation is not super reliable yet. But I think the only thing that I needed to do to correct the code was I needed to change this variable name. And other than that, the LLM encoded the whole thing perfectly. So once you have those encodings, what you can do in Blawx is you can set up interviews, questions, and chats. Now, the existing version that's out there has some other things that have been re-implemented here, but again, this is aimed at trying to focus on what we can do with an LLM. So questions are kind of straightforward. You can set up a question like who won, and that has an encoding. Is it true that the winner of game was winner? And so you're just encoding your question in the declarative logic language, which in the background is getting converted into a Prolog-like language called SCASP that gets used by the reasoner. So we've got that as a question. And now we've got something that we're calling interviews. I think that name is probably going to have to change because I don't think it's very descriptive. But the idea here is that the rules themselves don't specify everything that you would need to know in order for a system to decide what order to ask questions in. And so this is a system that allows you to use the same blocks that are being used in the rules, but in the definition of an agenda. So here we're setting out an agenda where the first phase is about games, and it's saying ask about games. And then in the second phase, it's about throws, and it says for each game that you know about, ask for exactly 2 players. And immediately after each player, ask for exactly 1 answer to the question, what did that player throw in that sign? So this is a language for expressing an interview schedule, an interview agenda, as it were, right? So we've got an interview agenda, we've got a question to ask, and now we combine them in something that's currently called a chat. And so in test chat here, you can see we've given it the name test chat, and we've said that the test interview I just showed you is the schedule of questions, and the answer that we want it to generate is who won. And you just edit those in this simple form like that. Once you've done that, you can click on your run chatbot button, and it's going to take you into an LLM chat. And we can say hello to kind of wake it up. And if it's working, it'll ask about games. So let's call test game for RaC Guild. And it says, who are the players? So I'm going to say Jason is a player. What sign did Jason throw? We will say scissors. And then it asks who is another player, and I will say Bob. And what did Bob throw? Rock. And now what's happening is that the LLM-powered agent is reconfiguring the facts that I've put into the chat in a JSON package. It's sending that JSON package to an endpoint where it's getting converted into the same SCASP code that the code uses for the rules. And then all of that is being sent with the question to answer to, am I still with you? My screen blinked. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so all of that's being sent to the reasoner in the background, which generates an answer. And it takes that answer and then it reformulates it in natural language, which is this sentence up here. So Bob won the game. And then it includes verbatim the natural language explanation that came back from the Blawx reasoner. And so the idea is that this sort of thing should when we build in, the additional features that it needs in terms of being able to validate encodings and being able to save tests and rerun them after you've changed things, and being able to keep track of changes in the legislation and, what the currency of the encoding is, all these kinds of things, it should provide a platform that you could use to generate a back-end legal question answering tool that can be used for things like this chatbot, or can be used for any other purpose that you could send information over an API and get responses back. And it would also be possible to use, like the previous version of Blawx is currently being used for legislative drafting tasks, to do analysis of the effects of a proposed piece of legislation, or to kind of find out if the changes that you're thinking about making to a rule actually have the effects that you hope that they will. So I don't want to take up too much time, so I think I'm going to stop there. That's the secret preview of the new version of Blawx.
That's awesome, Jason. I'm sure other people have got questions, but my first question for you is, so why did you start again? Why is this the new version? What was the first one a really rough MVP? But it sounds like it's out there in the world and being used, right?
Yeah, it is open source. It's available at GitHub, and I promise at some point in the next week I'll get the demo site back up and running, which is blawx.dev. But the main reason for starting over was the part that I was showing you about the categories and relationships. It turns out that having those category and relationships inside the encoding itself, where they are in the current version, made it very difficult to get that information out and make it available for other uses, like making it easier for the LLM to figure out how to encode facts, or making it easier for the LLM to interpret the answers that were coming back, or what have you. And so the main reason for starting over is that I wanted to start with a system where the ontology was on the outside of the encoding and was easier to share with the LLM when you were trying to make things happen. It also, separating them that way also kind of breaks the encoding process down into 2 steps, which makes the LLM better at doing both of those steps. So my hope is that by having them in different places, you can get the LLM's help doing categories and relationships. And then when you're happy with that, you can get the LLM's help writing actual code, and the LLM will be more effective at both as a result. So that's basically where my thinking was. The changes are not dramatic, but that's the main crux of why I wanted to start from scratch.
Thank you. Awesome. Rock. Sorry, I don't know your actual name.
Yeah, look, it's Michael Cronin here. I'm not actually Sprock789, although it is one of my accounts. I work for the Australian government, and my work computer is a classified one. I can't actually get into Google Meet off there, so I'm on my iPad. Look, it's very interesting. You sort of half answered my question, and I'm reasonably new to this, but what is the LLM in this context? My general understanding is that it's some opus of say legal data, but what is the LLM here?
Oh, it's just in I think in the current demo it's actually GPT-4o.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's
Right.
not a customized model. It's a generic model. It's just customized prompting in order to help it to understand. There's kind of 3 layers that it needs to get through. It needs to get through doing JSON in the way that the Blockly user interface is expecting it. Then it needs to get through using the blocks that you have defined in the way that you have defined them to be used. And then it needs to get through actually encoding what the law says in that section. And so there's a lot of instruction in the prompting in order to help it get through all of those layers and actually generate code that will compile, will display, and will do what the legislation says.
Okay, that makes sense, but it's not built on any particular
Not a
bespoke.
custom model at all. No, it's
Right.
a open API model.
Could you do that? Could you have a, I mean, in our jurisdiction, there's obviously, 100 years of legacy, and a lot of our legislation doesn't actually, we don't have new legislation. We just change the stuff. The Tax Act of 1936 has got, 10,000 pages of variations. But yeah, I mean, you have a sort of, and ChatGPT 4.0 will give you some answer, but it's not the right answer, or not the right. I mean, I don't know if there's a question there, but
well, it's the idea that Blawx is kind of built on is the background encoding is a declarative logic encoding, which has the effect that you're able to break down the encoding task into small sections of law that correspond to small sections of code. And what that means is that you can kind of chew through existing legislation piece by piece, and it gives the LLM more of a chance of being able to understand what it's seeing. And then it generates the symbolic code. You can get into Blawx and take a look at the code, see if it makes sense. If it doesn't, fix it, move on to the next piece. And so the idea is that we should be able to do symbolic codings that were verified by human experts that they match the meaning of the law, but we're getting as much of the LLM's help as possible in generating that symbolic representation. So it's aimed directly at doing things with laws that are already there, not exclusively for new drafting.
Okay. All right.
Tina has a question in the chat, Joe.
Cool. Tina from Digital Benefits Network. Hey, welcome, Tina. Your question.
Yes, I was just curious who was currently using Blawx, and I think I have a general idea. Government.
Yeah, it's the Government of Canada. I developed the last version with the Canada School of Public Service inside the Government of Canada. They have projects going with a number of different departments. Some of them are, let's build a website that helps people answer a question. And then one of them is, let's draft a new regulation. And so it's getting used for a couple of different purposes in experiments across the Government of Canada. And I guess the regulation project is not actually experiment. That's just a real regulation process. So there's a story, a posting that's supposed to come out from the OECD at some point this year about that process that has been written. And I don't know what's taking OECD so long to publish it, but I'm hoping to share that link with everybody as soon as it shows up.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Does anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, I'll throw in another. So my question is around hallucinogenic LLMs. How does Blawx deal with that, or is the fact that you're kind of in MVP of this new version haven't addressed that yet?
Well, the hallucination problem is sort of it's present, I suppose, but it doesn't show up a lot in the specific tasks that we're asking the LLM to do in this. When we give it a bunch of instructions about how to write code, and then we give it a small section of legal text and ask it to generate some JSON based on the content of that legal text, hallucination is not as big a concern as just error, right? The real concern is that it just isn't smart enough to understand the implications, and so it makes mistakes or is somehow inadequate. So error is much more, pertinent in that situation than hallucination. Likewise, in the chat, it's doing two different things. It's taking what the user said in response to questions, and it's converting that into Blawx JSON request. Again, hallucination is not a big concern there. It's more just mistakes. And then it's taking the answer that's coming back from Blawx and translating that into natural language, because it comes over as a kind of a coded thing. And again, translation tasks, the LLMs don't tend to make stuff up. They just tend to sometimes get it wrong. So the specific things that we're asking the LLM to do inside Blawx don't have a lot of hallucination concerns, which is very unlike my job, because my day job is with Thomson Reuters, where we are using LLMs for completely different kinds of tasks, and hallucination is a constant concern that we're trying to chase down. Not so here.
Cool. One more follow-on question before Tina and Ariel take the floor. You're doing this off your own bat, right? This is a
Yep.
side hustle for you. Yeah.
Effectively, yes. Yeah. So I was doing the last version with the Government of Canada for a couple of years while I was their Director of Rules as Code, but it was very difficult getting permission to do any work with LLMs while I was inside the Government of Canada. And so I had all of these features that I wanted to try and integrate, but couldn't do it while I was working on that version for them. And so since I left the Government of Canada, I have been doing this kind of evenings and weekends and when I can find time. And this is how far it's gotten so far.
Well, thank you very much for your service.
I'm delighted.
Appreciate
I like the idea that it helps people kind of see the thing that we see, right?
Yeah.
It helps people see the potential that seems obvious to us in what happens if you take legal knowledge and turn it into software. So
absolutely. As I think I've said before, I'm totally from the outside of government, community, not involved in any public service, civil service role at all, and putting the law into the hands of citizens is huge. And this, it's just blown me away this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Yeah, awesome, really awesome. So with that, unless anybody has anything else, Tina, Jess, please.
Ariel, do you want to start? Thank you.
I was actually going to say, Tina, how about you start and give us the overall summary of Policy2Code, and then maybe I can talk about some of the specific projects and the work that our team is doing.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. Tina Amper. I'm the community advisor for the Rules as Code Community of Practice. It's at the Digital Benefits Network, a project of the Beeck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown University. So we formed the Rules as Code Community of Practice officially in February of this year. And we have over, I think, 130 members now from all over. It's mostly US because we focus specifically on US public benefit programs like food stamps and food programs and Medicaid and that kind of information. And so we have in our Rules as Code community of practice, a lot of our members are from nonprofits, from private companies. Syncopate is a member. A bunch of you are members. I know that Jason is, and Martin Perron also is a member. So the big initiative that we have right now is that we have the Policy2Code prototyping challenge. We launched that in May based on feedback from our community and some research goals that we want to accomplish within the Beeck Center. And so the Policy2Code prototyping challenge is inviting teams and individuals to experiment with Gen AI, with generative AI, to translate policies, US government benefit policies, into plain language logic and software code. And so we opened it up for applications. We currently have 14 teams that are prototyping. We had our first check-in meeting with the teams last week. Very exciting stuff. Some of the teams focus on specific public benefit programs, and a lot of what Jason was saying is in converting pockets or bite-sized sections of the policies into code is some of the things that the teams are doing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ariel to talk about specifics.
Thanks. That was a great overview. I mean, I will say one of the reasons we're doing this is that we think there needs to be just a lot more experimentation and also open documentation of what's possible with Rules as Code, as well as the possibility of using AI. One of the biggest hindrances we hear all the time on kind of our bigger advocacy around Rules as Code is just the amount of human hours of writing code, reviewing code, extracting legacy code from old systems, things like that. And we think there still needs to be very much like humans in the loop in all of that work. However, can the LLMs currently, and especially with the commercial models now available, like perform at a level that they can do some of the work so that humans end up more in a reviewing case rather than just a code writing case, and hopefully also expands who can participate, which we're also very excited about. It's been quite flattering to see the interest and response, and having a partner like Tina running community, and that's something we've really invested in at the Beeck Center, is that in our communities of practice is that we have it's someone's job to run the community. It's not just like a side thing that we're running off the side of our desks, and that's one way we've been having great growth and interest, and kind of tying into the larger network that we run, and being based at a university. But it's been very cool with Policy2Code. We've actually had a lot of new people come in the door because we've talked about the work in a different way, and it's a different type of participation. So in the 14 teams, we have everything from like companies who are working on projects that maybe already had funding and are kind of on their way to things, but want to be doing more work with the community and sharing what they're learning, and also learning from the community. We have some public sector folks who are in a couple teams. I think one of my only disappointments so far has been that we didn't have a purely public sector team apply to be part of the challenge. And then we've also had some very cool kind of community connections, including a group that were individuals who showed their interest, and then we helped match make them into a team. So now they have a software developer and a product person and a policy person all working together, which is really exciting. And there's another team of women who all knew each other. They went to grad school together, but they all work in private sector companies as data scientists. And they're like, we want to apply our skills on public benefits and helping people. And so they have teamed up. So it's been cool to kind of offer that as an opportunity. And then we are also running our own team at Georgetown, which includes undergrad and graduate students, faculty and staff, all working together across actually 3 different research centers. And so that's been another like really just lovely piece of collaboration and kind of growing interest in the space. Last week, we did have our first touch point, and after reading all the applications, which were wonderful, it was really cool to just hear everyone voice and talk about their work. And so I think one note for this group is that we are having our demo day in September. It will be on September 17th in US time from 3 to 5 p.m. And we can make sure you get that information in the right time zone. But we did try to schedule it in the day so our international friends can join us. And at that demo, everyone will be giving a short presentation on what they're building, what they've been experimenting with, and what they've been learning. And then we at Georgetown will be taking that information and documentation and writing longer form materials and resources on how LLMs are currently performing and some of the other things learned in this experimentation based on what all the teams are doing. But a couple different call outs, I'm just looking at my notes here. I think one thing, and this might be an interesting kind of international collaboration spot, is where kind of metrics, both looking at reviewing the policy, like is the policy in a good quality place to be transformed? So like when we're talking about some of these really old regulations, like is it served well by a rules as code approach? And then similarly, how to evaluate the output and the quality of the logic, code, et cetera. And then also scoring how the LLMs are actually performing. Our students found a really interesting framework that was developed by a professor at Arizona State University, which we're starting to adopt and adapt. And so I think we'll have some stuff to share on that. But I think there's a very active conversation around in the Policy2Code cohort about how do we evaluate that effectiveness and what are these different metrics for it. There's also, let's see, what was that? I had another one I wanted to make sure I called out to you guys. I think there's also a lot of interesting questions too, especially when we're looking at the benefit space on where something is fully public facing, so used by someone who's seeking benefits. And then in the US, there's a lot of nonprofits who help people navigate and access benefits. And so if you're building a tool more for like assisters, what are some of the ethical considerations with that, and how do you notify, how do you offer consent? And I think that's going to be an ever growing consideration for government, as well as, you know, it's one thing when it's the end user actually using like a chat bot, but when there's this intermediary who's also using AI in something, what does that look like? I'm not familiar with this. Benefit me. Yeah. So yeah, we have quite a few folks in our wider community of practice and some in Policy2Code who are building benefit screening and kind of like end user tools, and then tools that aren't available like on a website publicly, but would be used by a worker at a nonprofit, like a social worker who's helping support somebody navigating. Happy to take any questions, and I can also talk a little bit about our team and what our experiments are more specifically as well.
Cool. Does anybody want to start off, or shall I dive in again?
I'll jump in and just ask: is the project, the Policy2Code thing, is it directly aimed at using LLMs, or is it more kind of generic people experimenting around all kinds of encodings?
We framed it as generative AI, and so letting people kind of choose their own adventure in that. We have collected kind of more technical and experimentation details from the teams as well. So we will be sharing more of that information as time goes on, but we didn't dictate like you have to use these models or these tools. It was meant to be broad and experimental. And I think it's more than, we're excited about the AI possibility. I think it's just very exciting to have people talking about rules as code in community while building real things, and that it's not like one government project. It's like a bunch of people all building code and having really dynamic conversations who are at different levels of experience and expertise with it too, which is also exciting.
I'll jump in. So that's a perfect segue to my questions, which are community questions. Yeah, the engagement of public service and academia and the people on the ground.
Yep.
Who the legislation, the policies affect. I'm really interested in that space. Obviously, the Benefit Me link that I put into the chat is the project where I met the guys from Salsa. And we started the rules as code journey, essentially, which was funded by a Web3 community, the Cardano community. So there is a lot of there are a lot of smart contracts to be built that would have law regs in the back end of it, right? So there is a much broader request for this, other than governments, local, national, state, etc. So broadening the knowledge and getting more people involved from community is certainly kind of my personal mission, and it's interesting to hear how that might be happening in the States.
Yeah, I think we're slowly building it. I mean, some of our kind of like broader theory of change is that, and part of why our digital benefits network, which is the bigger kind of umbrella project, I also realized I didn't really introduce myself. I just passed off from Tina, but that's like the bigger project that we sit within at the Beeck Center. And that project's origin is out of a research project that was looking at how data technology and design are being used in public benefits delivery in the US. And one of the things we saw in that project was that there wasn't a place or a network for people to come who were wanting to work in these newer ways to build digital services that really serve people. There's some other organizations who care about this, and we work closely with many of them, like Code for America, for example, which has like that created the Code for All and like bigger international networks as well. But they weren't building kind of the network-based approach where we're doing a bit of the like knowledge building research and hands-on assistance at times. And so that has allowed us to create basically like a pipeline for all of the then more focused community of practice work that we do, that we have like a much bigger mailing list and trough of people that we're collaborating with, and then giving them opportunities to participate on things that they care really deeply about and impact their work. And it's been really interesting to like get very positive feedback, in particular from our government folks who are like, you guys are focusing on topics that are focused as opposed to kind of broader, like just digital service improvement of like getting into the weeds at a little bit different level with it, which has been well received. Our other main area of focus right now in the Digital Benefits Network is on digital identity. And we have a new research project that we just announced with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, which sets the digital identity guidelines for the US, but is also those guidelines are adopted by quite a few international governments as well. And so we'll be doing a research project with them on how identity can and could and should be used in the delivery of public benefits. So some overlap in relation into rules as code, but those are the kind of like gritty technical topics with like a very human lens that we are tackling right now.
Awesome. I'd love to catch up with you and have a conversation around that intersection. Is exactly the intersection that I'm sitting at the moment. I'm working with a group here in Aotearoa on a digital identity project for Māori, so which is a very different proposition to a central state government actor. I mean, it's a polycentric governance system. There are trust frameworks all over the place that interact. So it's a whole different area of research and study based on millennia old traditions, knowledge systems, legislation, if you like, termed in a very different way, tikanga, kawa, all of these things. I'd love to have a conversation with you about that, because kind of an entry point in for people to get involved in better rules and rules as code. So look forward to that conversation at a later date.
Connections, good stuff.
What this is all about, right? I'll leave you open to the other question, Michael.
Just like to get your take on how you it's really a sort of a communications messaging type question. I mean, you mentioned you have 14 different teams. I mean, in our particular proof of concept we're doing with rules as code, we're working with multiple government agencies. We have about 10 or so we're working with at the moment. It will increase, but they range from very large organizations with 30,000 people and big IT teams and in-house programmers through to a 30 person shop with one or two webmasters who don't really know what's going on under the hood, but they're all doing their sort of proof of concepts. I mean, how do you sort of message, and how do you get the sort of involvement in with sort of different people, different skill set type people coming into it?
I don't know if I have an answer for like purely the government team. I feel like this might be a good Jason question. Jason's one of the few people who I know who's actually done this inside government, purely under this label too. My background is in government. I worked for New York City government and rebuilt the benefits eligibility screener while I was there. I still live in New York City. I just don't work for the government anymore. And we didn't call it rules as code. It was just, you know, how do we take all of the logic from the programs and be able to screen people for 40 different programs using the internet. And we rebuilt all of it and refactored how we ask the questions and the entire technology stack that goes with it. And so that's been kind of my revelation in the last couple of years, is also to find this international community who has created a way of talking about this work that does relate and resonates, I think, with a lot of people. But I still even get questions from funders and people in government, and they're like, do rules as code exist in government systems? And I'm like, yeah, like everyone who has a digital system has rules as code. They just didn't do it in a standardized or shared way. So there's like a better way to do it, but it exists. And so I think some of it has been that kind of like advocacy and knowledge building around it, that this is a framework and there's an international group of practitioners who are working and thinking about this work, has, I think, been quite powerful. There is in the Policy2Code teams, there's an organization here in the US called MITRE. They're a federally funded research center, so they get money from the federal government to do research projects, and they are working with at least one federal agency on a rules as code approach. But it's very interesting that they've kind of farmed that out still as like a research project, not as an implementation project, although it may turn into implementation in the future. But yeah, curious, Jason, not to put you on the spot, but if others have ideas about how you get teams together around this work.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that my experience has not been on the scale of entire departments. What our stuff inside the government of Canada, so Canada School of Public Service was kind of doing an educational campaign trying to let people know what rules as code is. And then when there were people in various departments who kind of thought, oh, hey, that's cool, those people would get back in touch with the Canada School and then maybe set up a prototype experiment, right? So we weren't ever really trying to onboard a department. What we were trying to do was find the 3 people in a department who were interested in trying something. And that, that I can only say show works better than tell. And that was the main reason that we built Blawx the way that we did, with the visual interface and the interface, like the way you test it inside the web interface and all of that. It's very easy for us to just take into a demo and show it to some people in the Department of Finance and say, hey, this is a piece of a legislation that's under your jurisdiction, and we help these people in this other department kind of navigate their way through it, and here's how we did it, and it all kind of clicks more easily. So yeah, it's the other thing is that at the same time, like rules as code is a very large category, right? Basically, anytime that you're kind of paying attention to the task of putting legal knowledge into code, you're doing rules as code kind of some way. What we were doing beyond just trying to encourage people to pay attention to it was we were trying to encourage people to do it in a way it has never been done before. And so our task was harder. We had set out a harder task for ourselves than the average persuading people to do rules as code task. Because we were saying, hey, do this with declarative logic instead of Python, and also don't use a programmer. Have your subject matter expert be the person who actually writes the code. And so we had all of those extra hurdles to jump, which is why it was a lot easier for us to target people than departments.
Yeah, makes sense.
When you figure it out, please let me know.
Tina, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment from our end. So I started working on rules as code in June of last year. So I was new to the whole thing as well and didn't work in government. I worked with government as a consultant. But Michael, in the way we attracted attention to the rules as code communities, I think Ariel has done research in this space since 2021-22, and the research was about how to improve digital delivery of public benefits programs, right? So improving service delivery for government public benefits programs. So people, you know, were familiar with the research study and how we're trying to enhance that space. And then we offered the research, and then we offered events, and then we offered the community to try and get this small subset of people that are working in translating policies into software code together to try and, you know, fix that problem or address that problem. So it was more like, for me, it's I'm a community builder. I always start with the funnel, like what attracted these people to us. And for us, it was like the core goal of Digital Benefits Network is to improve digital delivery of public benefits programs. And then rules as code is one approach you can do that. I don't know if that made sense.
It does.
Yeah. As soon as you can show somebody something, like with that Benefit Me one as well, you know, we only did, I think, the first or 3 parts of the Act, right, the Social Security Act, and as soon as you show them that, they're like, right, how do we get the rest? Let's go, let's do the whole thing now, and then what's next, and what's next, and what's next, right? Yeah, always the way. Any other questions, ladies, gents? No? Cool. So we've very nicely taken up more than our allotted 45 minutes that we made for this meeting this morning. We don't have anybody, I don't think, yet lined up for our next meeting, which, thank you very much, Con, is on the first Wednesday of August, the 7th at 7 p.m. So we're alternating to try and get as many international people in as we possibly can, right? So yeah, it's morning and evening for me here in New Zealand, and the opposite for you guys, I think, for a lot of you guys. We do have a Miro board, which we'll send the link out to again on email. If you have something that you would like to present, do a show and tell, or open a discussion on. I'm really interested in the Syncopate paper that just came out in terms of governance of these systems. That's something that I would be interested in talking about. But if anybody has anything else, there is a little schedule on that Miro page of you know, literally plop in your details and that you're wanting to take a spot at our next Rules as Code Guild meeting. Apart from that, yes, thank you, Ariel. We'll put that on the Miro board and in the emails as well. Thank you all for coming along this morning. And unless there's anything else, I'll let you get on with your day and look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Right.
See you next time.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.